Wayne's World.
Party on, Jerry.
Party on, Garth.
All right, here we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Agile Table Topics, Episode 4. Yay! Insert Muppet Scream. Yeah. Episode 4. I'm excited because today is the Open Practice Library podcast takeover. We have Matt and Jerry joining us. Welcome, Matt and Jerry.
Hey, y'all.
Hey. Glad to be here.
Very happy.
Yep, very happy.
Excited even, Jerry.
Very excited.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Always one-upping. You know what, Matt? I'm ecstatic to be here. Take that.
The enthusiastic takeover.
There we go. The enthusiastic takeover. We're going to have fun with this one. Let me do the intro. We're going to jump into it. So Matt is awesome. He is a Agile evangelist, promoting and mentoring others to jointly learn how to facilitate new ways of working for product teams. Culture and people interactions matter more than any process or practice, one which is to implore to him. That is the most important value of Agile and delivery mantra that exists. Without the people, very little will get done. And then let's introduce Jerry. Jerry is a Principal Innovation Practitioner at Red Hat, a husband, dad of 3, a disc golf enthusiast. He loves creative problem solving like Romeo loved Juliet, like Harry loves Sally, and like Kanye loves, well, Kanye. He brings human-centered design, lean startup, and agile development to products for over a decade. He's passionate about leading talented teams, designing valuable, easy-to-use, and enjoyable solutions to real problems, especially when working on new ideas. So everyone, please welcome Matt and Jerry, and I'll give you guys a second to throw in a quick ad lib for yourselves as well. Matt, you go first.
All right. Hi, y'all. Matt Takane, work with the Open Innovation Labs team over at Red Hat. The big thing that gets me up in the morning, the thing that gets me like super hyper energized is seeing impact that creates impact. Right? When you look to chat with others and they have a spark of an idea and they use the idea to then innovate and evolve their way of thinking, their way of working with their team. And when they come back to you and they see you in the hallway and they're like, that one thing that you showed me, that social contract, that small little nugget for team forming in a remote setting that changed the way that we interacted. That gets me up in the morning. And that's what we strive for. That's why people are the most important asset of every company. And I'll punt the soccer ball over to Jerry.
The thing that gets me up in the morning is one of two things. One, my boys, or coffee. Yep. So that's what I say. Also, Matt, I agree with you. My intro was wordy. I think we need to cut it down. Omar, next time we do this, just be like, here's Jerry. He's a guy on Earth.
And then Let's do it.
We'll cut it at that.
He ran away from the circus because he was too agile.
Too agile. Is there such a thing? I think not.
No, never.
You did nail the stuff that I love, though. Innovation stuff. Really working on new ideas. That's my jam. I love tackling big problems, getting teams like at the start of the idea life cycle to come up with all the ways it could solve something, prioritizing, rapid prototyping, feedback, all that stuff. That's the stuff that makes my heart happy. But that's just one facet of overall like software or product development. And so we kind of touch all different areas of it, but that's the thing I really get excited about. So, and I'm a guy on Earth.
There you go. And it's super awesome. I worked with both Matt and Jerry back in the day. We were an awesome team, and they have actually go ahead and talk about the Open Practice podcast real quick, because both of you are the hosts, and I was a guest on the first or second episode ever, I think. Probably the second one, I think.
Yeah, Patrick Carney was the first one. So I think you might have been it with episode 3. Social Contract.
3.
Yeah, that's it. Matt, you are so eloquent with what the Open Practice podcast is. So take it away, buddy.
No, normally I get about like at least 2 to 3 minutes to scratch down some ideas there, Jerry. But if we were to nail down a elevator pitch for the Open Practice Library, it would sound a little bit like this.
Nice, Matt.
Nice.
Come join us for a deeper dive on real practitioners for any of the practices that you can find at Open Practice Library. Practices from the discovery side of product identification and really exploration, through prioritizing, through the delivery, and how do you form that team? How do you create that foundation of culture and collaboration and communication within your team? How do you weave in those technical concepts, those technical tools, those technical ways of working that you have with your teams? If those practices call to you, if you want to learn more from a practitioner, come to the Open Practice Podcast, because the Open Practice Podcast, we talk to those people. We ask them the hard questions, facilitation tips, what happens when things go wrong, and where can we go right? We dig a little bit deeper than what you can find inside of a written format that is in the Open Practice Library.
Yeah. And like we said before, Omar was on there. So
Yeah.
listener at home listening to this, if you want to hear Omar in a guest format,
Yeah.
listen to episode 3 of the Open Practice Podcast, because he's on there and it was great.
It was a good one. All right. So thank you both for being awesome guests for today's show. So here's how Agile Table Topics work. We answer the questions that folks have produced. Source them from Twitter, from LinkedIn, from Facebook. I did a post like, hey, what questions do you have about Agile, program management, project management, facilitation, all the good stuff? And I put all of them in this cool bowl here. And then what we do is we rifle through and we pick a question. So are you both ready for question number 1?
I heard it was a cup, Omar, not a bowl.
Agile. Be agile, Matt.
Be agile. All right, here we go.
Circumstances changed.
Solo cup topics.
Ooh, this is
Agile Pong.
This is a fun
Agile
one.
Pong.
Agile Pong. All right, here's our first fun question. What does it mean, agile transformation? Where to start? That's a good, fun question. Like, what does it mean, agile transformation? Where do you even start?
Well, typically I say start at the beginning. But
Nobody
where,
wants
but where,
to do that.
but where is
Everybody
the
wants to
beginning?
start at the end, Matt.
Start at the end.
I mean, you can't. There is a practice start at the end, which is actually done in the beginning. But like when you think of like an agile transformation, well, it's incredibly broad. It actually doesn't really mean as much as a transformation, you think, because transformation, usually you have an end in mind. But when you think of like an agile transformation, the way that just the term ends up being or should be interpreted, it's really just a journey that you happen to be on. There is no end game except for the fact that you really want to drive improvement. That's why you hear this term Kaizen, right? Continuous improvement. And when you think about agile transformation, the beginning is now, because now is when you can start making the change to continuously improve. And where do you look? How do you look, right? Well, I'm going to bring in the Open Practice Library for that, because retrospectives is a great one inside of that. You could actually do almost any type of reflection work. If you have a hard time identifying like where or what it is you want to try and like reflect on, you can run something like almost like a product canvas for like how it is that you want to work. What are those targeted outcomes that you really want to drive towards? And then you can say, okay, well, what about that? Why aren't we there? What could we do? What are we doing now that actually is inhibiting us to actually get to where we want to go? Now, kind of like talked my way around in sort of like a crazy circle, but boiling it down, I would say start now, and you can uncover what it is that you want to do next. And that the agile transformation is more of a continual journey of improvement, not necessarily a end goal state.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I agree. There is not an end to transformation work. There isn't. You're continually finding new ways to improve. And one of the things that I have grown to believe is very important at the start of this is to get everybody to understand, why are we doing this in the first place? Because a lot of people will say, hey, we need to be agile, or we need agile transformation. And it's easy to look up frameworks and start implementing things right away. But there's so much confusion about what agility actually is. And there's a lot of different frameworks that are out there. And so the first thing I like to do is to get people to understand, like, can you articulate to me what problem you're solving with agile transformation? Like, what are you seeing as your pain points that you want to solve? If they have a hard time talking through that, I don't think they're ready for agile transformation, because they don't know what they want yet. So you might have to take them on an exploration journey of understanding the problems and the context of the problem space and being able to clearly articulate those so that you can prioritize them and start to know, okay, what are the things we're going to tackle in our Agile transformation? And the other thing is just being clear about what Agile means. And there's so many times where people think Agile is the, adoption of Jira, or Agile means safe. Like they think it's a specific framework, and it's not. It doesn't matter what you implement or what you pull from multiple frameworks. What Agile means is you have created either a team or an organization or an entire company that can adapt successfully to change quickly. Like that's the main purpose behind it. And it's not just about speed, getting stuff out the door, but it's about doing it well so that you're getting the right thing out the door in what you're building. So that's kind of being specific about software development, right? It's a lot of people want Agile and they're like, I need to be faster. And it's like, well, yes, but speed is always in the service of delivering the right thing and being able to pivot and find out what that looks like. And so that's an important thing that I need people to understand is most people's view of Agile is incomplete, and we need to level set right off the bat to say this, the real goal here is we want to be able to adapt, change quickly, and to do it well so we can deliver the right thing as fast as possible. Yeah. Then once that's set, then you can map problems to it and start to figure out where you start on your journey.
Yeah. So Jerry, you actually bring even two things just straight up inside of my mind. One is like the ADKAR model, right? So awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and then reinforcement, right? So you bring that awareness and you get everyone on the same page, and then you create this desire for change, this desire for this transformation. And then you start sharing the knowledge, like where do we want to go? How are we going to do it? That's just kind of like where my brain is. And if anyone's not familiar with ADKAR, ADKAR, it's an acronym, and you can go look it up. It's a really cool model that helps create a like formulaic way to go about change. How do you instill change? Not just have it be a top-down thing, but more or less have it be baked into the change that you want to kind of occur. And Jerry, the other thing that you're kind of bringing to my mind was around experiment for change, because you were talking about experiments. That's what gets you up in the morning. And you were kind of like outlining this strong loop and experimentation of like what you could look to do. Try this thing over here, and then look to reflect back and improve upon whatever it is that you really want to like go forward with. But you do so intentionally.
Mm-hmm. And I'll yes and both of you on everything that you said. That Jerry, you kind of hit it like why like what's the purpose of this transformation? Because sometimes a CIO or CEO, they're on a flight, they open the business magazine, oh, this Agile thing is cool, they come back and like, we're going Agile, and the rest of the org is like, what are you talking about? What is this? Like, what is the why? What is the purpose? Are we trying to get the market faster? Are we trying to adapt to change quicker? Is there mandates that we have to meet in order to get our product out to customers? Like we have to figure out the why, and like that's probably the best place to start. And then also I'll throw in like, do we have executive sponsorship? Because I know we talked about in the Agile community, like, grassroots, start from the bottom up, but sometimes if you don't have that executive sponsorship, if you don't have that person on your team, you can hit so many roadblocks and things won't work. Mm-hmm. So I would say, where to start, the how, having your executive sponsorship or that person in your corner, but also, don't just jump into the first thing that comes to mind. Like, I know we said safe, and safe always gets beat up. It's because people implement it. The analogy I like to use, I stole from Phil, our good friend Phil at Red Hat, where you must be this tall to ride, where most orgs will like, hey, we want to go Agile, so we're going to take essential safe and put it in our whole thing. Well, you need to start on basic safe because you're not tall enough to ride. Where the analogy is where you're a kid, you want to go to that giant roller coaster, but you're not tall enough. You can go into Scooby-Doo, ride that for another year or two, and then you mature, you grow, and then you can go on a bigger one, not the biggest one yet because you're not there. You have to continue growing and maturing. Mm-hmm. So that's where I think one, the why we're doing this, executive sponsorship, and then two, assessing where you are, how mature are you, and then starting from there. Those are my usual thoughts.
Gotta. One of my favorite sayings is think big, start small, and learn fast. And even in Agile transformation, it's that way. Like, you have a vision for where you want to be in the future. That's like you're thinking big, but you have to start small and find out what works for you and this team in this context. I have more times than not found that implementing a single framework is not the best solution for teams. That in almost every case, it's either you need to change the framework up a little bit to meet the context of the team or the organization, or you need to change the team to fit the context of the framework, or most often you need to change a little bit of both.
Yeah.
That there needs to be a little bit of change, like pulling from the right pieces of different frameworks that make sense for this team, and then getting the team to work in new ways so that there's like a good match between the two. And I think that's where sometimes these frameworks can be really hard and rigid, because it seems like this is the only thing you can implement, is this in its entirety. And it only works if everything is there.
Yeah.
And that gets really hard.
It gets back to the whole, individuals and interactions over processes and tools.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about these scaling frameworks, a lot of times they're implemented as a process, and they're done to the teams. They're not really even done with the teams, and they're not done for the teams. They're done to the teams. And when you take an implementation tactic that is more evolutionary versus revolutionary, you look to implement what the team needs, and you can look to create a scaffolding scaled framework that you can then build with the teams up through the program for coordination and collaboration. And that's where a lot of the power is, because now you're valuing the people. Because when you value the people are going to work better. Actually, they will work more efficiently because they have trust, they have psychological safety, they have a drive, and they know where they're going. And they are ultimately in control. Now, you always need to guide, right? You need to be a little Sherpa. But at the end of the day, you aren't mandating something. You aren't pushing a process onto something. I mean, how many times, even as an adult, do we like being told what to do? Someone says, you can't put your drink there. My first inclination, put my drink there.
We have 3 dads in the room. We all know what you're talking about, Matt.
Oh yeah.
We don't have to try.
It's like,
Yeah.
All
Don't
right.
touch that. Don't eat that gum from underneath the table.
And they eat it.
What gum?
Well, I think that was a good first question to get things going. Let's move on to the second one, because I know I want to keeping track of our time box to make sure we stay within it. So let's move on to question number 2. Digging in the bowl here, and let's grab question number 2.
Confirmed bowl. We experimented. We confirmed it's a bowl. Feedback loop.
It is a solo bowl.
It is
Matt.
Solo bowl.
All right,
We
question
all
number
win.
2. This is a good one. What approach would you take to managing a program that consists of some projects that use waterfall methodology and some that use Agile? Question again, what approach would you take to managing a program that consists of some projects that use waterfall and some that use Agile?
That's good. There's a couple of programs that I'm working with that are kind of that way. And if you had asked me this question maybe 2 years ago, I would have said, well, waterfall needs to stop. But what's interesting is I've actually found out where in some cases, in some areas, that actually is the best.
Yep.
It makes more sense for waterfall to be the methodology that's used. But I will say that I still will fight against it as much as I can. You have to prove to me that that's the best way. So most times, though, when you go into an organization, the assumption is we have some teams using Agile, some using waterfall. The waterfall people are more of laggards in the adoption process of these new ways of working, and you need to somehow motivate them to get on board. And having worked in like government space and even in some like bureaucracy with people that don't necessarily want to take risks, one of the things that I have found to be most successful is to create data that shows why you should be working one way over another way. So if you have some teams already using Agile, what I might do is start to like measure how they are working, to include things like not only their speed and what they can get done from sprint to sprint, but also like the satisfaction of what's delivered to their users and their customers and things like that. And the happiness level of the team itself. So like the team sentiment, right? Take that data and then measure it against the waterfall and see if there's a difference there right off the bat. If there isn't, what I might do is work with some of the Agile teams in order to tighten up how they're implementing Agile and get them to time box a period for a certain amount of time where you're leading them through a lot of like open practice library type practices and stuff, and collaboration and things like that, leading them through that and collecting data as you go. And then doing the same thing for the waterfall team and presenting that data to them and saying like, hey, this is how you guys could work in the future. Are there teams that are interested in trying this out for X amount of time, so that you're time boxing their experimentation with agility and then bringing them into that and then leading them through it. So I would kind of like pull from what you're seeing good, try to get as much data as you can in order to get people on board to see like through logic that there might be a better way of working, and then asking if they're comfortable experimenting for a period of time in this way of working and seeing if it fits for them by experiencing it themselves. How about you, Matt?
That's intriguing, because I was actually thinking of the question differently. Because while I track and I agree with a lot of what you were saying, it almost feels as if like you're taking two distinctive teams and looking just to try and like say, I work with this team, but this team actually doesn't interact with this other team. They're two kind of like separate ones. One which they just work differently, and we're trying to evolve and just improve, like actually both teams in their ways of working. I took the question actually as to where there's multiple teams that are trying to work together, and how do you actually approach that kind of a problem? How do you like integrate them if you do want to integrate them? And so my thinking of like a approach is something that we took at one of my old consulting gigs when I was doing like a program level agile coaching. And what we had is we had 3 teams that were using Agile, that were in a cadenced kind of like Scrum increments. So they were actually running in 3-week sprints. And then we had 2 different teams that were actually running in a waterfall type of sprint. And so they had a strong release structure. They needed all the requirements, all of those kinds of things. And we introduced, so the approach that we took to try and align the teams was one that was not changing the way that they worked, but actually looking to try and see how and when the teams integrate and how do they communicate with one another. And then we used that data because we found that it was not often enough and not the appropriate level of information, because some information is rigid and the other information is fluid, right? Because when you're in a waterfall mentality, you lock in a lot of the requirements. They don't change very often. And if you do, you have to go through a process in order to get that change, right? That's the bit more rigid ones. Not like a rock, but less fluid. And then you had like agile requirements that could change every 3 weeks if needed. And so we actually mapped out the dependencies between the various teams that they had. We did a big room. We did look to take some pages from SAFe when it comes to like mapping dependencies, identifying in a big program board the various teams, when they're expected to deliver something, not necessarily when they will, but expected, such that we can then we mapped out every 3 weeks. We would meet with all of the teams, representatives from the teams, and discuss what was done, where things are, and can we drop what we found undergoing that kind of a process was that the agile teams were able to adapt and really provide these incremental drops. And that actually made the waterfall teams more successful than they would have been, because then you would have had to been like, oh, well, you're not getting your integrated drop for another like 3 weeks because that's our release cycle. They're just able to just go, boop, here's your code. And so the waterfall teams were actually able to complete some of their work more so in time. But when it came time at the end to integrate everything together, because that's when they released all their stuff, big blow up.
Yeah.
Had some great retrospectives to where the next time that we did this, the next like 3-month cycle that we had, they gave 2 software drops in the middle of it. And that greatly improved. And so we actually looked to incrementally improve the integration between these various teams, but we used those hardships that were experienced by the team to then adjust as we moved forward for this.
And that's exactly where I was going. It was the first thing I would ask is, what are your pain points? All right, waterfall team, we know you do one giant release semi-annually, so once every 6 months. What is the pain points? Oh, so many bugs, or we have to roll back code and all this and that. Oh, like, okay. So that's a major pain. So what if we were, like you said, release more frequently? What do you think would happen? Well, if there was a bug, it would be smaller, it would be easier to find because we don't have this giant code block to go through. Oh, I think you're right. So why don't we experiment with that for a quarter or 2 and see what happens, and say, hey, leadership, here is our hypothesis, our experiment, and the outcome we hope to achieve. And when you have that conversation, and then Matt, you brought up a good point earlier about taking bits and pieces from different frameworks. Like from SAFe, I love the big room planning. Because you get all the teams in a room, you have your giant program board, and then you can visually see as that giant radiator where you can see all the interactions, dependencies, and the things like that. And you can see the whole thing over the course of 3 months, 6 months, a year. And then having those feedback loops, those check-ins, like you said in your example, every 3 weeks, we checked in with the waterfall team. Hey, how's everything going? Is there any variance? Do you need any help? Do you need change? And by running that experiment, you can slowly start morphing them over. But the goal shouldn't be to make them follow our agile cadence. It should be, are we delivering the right thing to the right people at the right time? Because, you know, some teams, it just makes more sense for them to stick to waterfall. Or if you have an operational support team, it makes sense for them to stick to Kanban. So they can drop and jump on hot things that come in immediately. So to be successful, I think org would probably need combinations. Like, yes, you want to go agile, want to keep everyone the same cadence. That's fine. Have like your deliveries and your communications and syncs at the same time, but also understand that some teams will use waterfall because that just makes the most sense for them. Or some teams will use Kanban instead of Scrum, or a bastardized version of all three. And that's okay. But at the end of the day, are we delivering on time, the right content to the right people within budget, all the good fun triangle scope stuff?
Yeah. I like how Jerry put it earlier as well, to where what is agility?
Yeah.
Right. It's, you know, being able to adapt to your scenario in order to produce value. And you can do that with agile teams. You can do that with waterfall teams. But as long as you're looking to improve and you're open to new experimentation, you can be successful.
Mm-hmm.
How fast, how much more efficiently you can actually look to deliver depends on actually what your risk tolerance is and the experiments that you run. So be intentional about what you do, measure what you are going to attempt, and try it. Try it for a time frame.
Yeah, and I'll say there's actually on the open practice library, there's a practice called the experiment canvas that you can use. That you guys said a lot of these things already that's on there. So it's a Miro, or you can just take the template and use it whatever you want, but it's a canvas layout that has you design your experiment before you go. So you do call out the problem, who has the problem, what's our solution, what's our hypothesis, what's the data we're going to use for pass or fail.
Yep.
You have this conversation where you're being really intentional about what you're about to do and how long you're going to do it for, in order to make sure the team understands fully the scope of what you're doing and when you're going to check progress on it and what data is important to decide if this hypothesis was true or not. So that's something you can use to help you in your experimentation with this kind of approach to stuff.
Excellent. Thanks, Jerry, for getting that in.
Excellent.
Do what I can.
I love it. I love it. All right. That was a good second question. Checking our time box. We're good. Moving on to question number 3 as I dig into the bowl here.
Solo bowl.
Solo bowl. Ooh. How is the best way to use icebreakers? What are their purpose? What is how is the best way to use icebreakers? What are their purpose? Oh, I'll jump on this because I love icebreakers. You can use them anytime, anywhere, anyway, anyhow. I'll fight anybody, anywhere. Anywho, you can use them at the beginning of a session, in the middle, like you come back from a break. You need to, you know, if you're having a heated conversation and people are getting tense. Hey, let's take a break and then come back and do icebreaker to kind of lighten the mood, kind of things like that. I like using, I call it, where I work, I call it the GitHub 5, where the first 5 minutes is water cooler time, where you kind of just talk and you let people transition over from their previous, because context switching is a real thing. And you give them those first 5 minutes just to shoot the breeze. Like, hey, did you watch the latest Game of Thrones? Or did you watch the football game last night? Go Bears. But you like how I snuck that in?
The Bears.
The Bears.
But basically, you can squeeze them in anytime. The purpose of them is to either lighten the mood, people to drop their defenses, because, you know, sometimes people are just like, meeting to meeting, and they're just like, and you get them to like loosen up, and you get them to have fun. It kind of sets the tone for the rest of the meeting. I mean, that's my initial take for jumping on, but what do you two think?
I really like jumping in here. So icebreakers are something that I also really love. I use them more than what their namesake actually is. Omar, you mentioned that they can be run kind of like anywhere, right? I believe very much that what we call icebreakers are culture enhancers. And these culture enhancers are used to intentionally create conversation and break people out of the mundane of the day-to-day work. But I also believe that these icebreakers, I'm just going to go back to icebreakers because everyone knows what we're kind of talking about, but they need to be intentional. They need to have a purpose. Because if you run an icebreaker without a purpose, right? Why are you running it? People start questioning, like, is this a waste of time? And it's not. You're actually trying to do something. Why not share that with everyone? Because when you know the purpose and the intent of this conversation that we're about to have during this icebreaker, right? We can answer two important questions. Why are we attending this? And what am I going to get out of this time together? Because it might be, I just want to have a conversation so that people can form relationships, right? That might be the whole goal. It might be the fact of like, I need people to get into an appropriate headspace, right? I need a creative mindset right now because we're about to embark on some ideation. Or I need to, let's see, what would be another good one? Off the cuff, thinking, maybe I need people to actually like have a greater sense of empathy for other people. There are icebreakers that look to create that style of a mindset to where you become a little bit more of an empath to the people that you are meeting with, because I am about to embark on a really complex conversation in like a retrospective to where we really need to reinforce this empathetic mindset, positive intent style thinking, and create psychologically safe environment. And you can do a lot of that groundwork in an icebreaker.
Yeah, I'll add, I think, so I agree with Matt. I use them for not just icebreaker. I tend to use them in one of three ways. One is as a facilitator to learn about who I'm in the room with. The second way is that piece that Matt was talking about, like the culture building or the team building. And then the third is sometimes just using it as a break. Like if you're in the middle of a long multi-day workshop or something like that, and you just need people to be able to like pull out and just do something fun for a little bit to kind of energize them. But to Matt's point is you need to know what you're using it for, what the intention is, so that there's purpose behind it. Because like Matt said, people will see through it if you're just doing something to fill time. That's why I think so many people hate icebreakers, is because that's been done so often. Yeah. But if you can explain what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and the purpose behind it or the value behind it, it makes a huge difference. So knowing why you want to do it, and then making sure that everybody understands the intention behind it can really go a long way in making them successful. Yeah. There's so many different ones that are out there that you can use.
Yeah. And know your time box that you have, because if you have only like a half hour, don't choose a 15-minute icebreaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely mix it up too.
Yeah, or if you have multiple hours, you could do an icebreaker like terrible teams.
Oh, wait. I think
You got yours too, Omar?
I got it right here. My terrible teams.
Mine's not in my office, y'all. It's downstairs in the game room.
It is always on the ready. And for folks, I will put the link to this in the description below as well. So yeah, terrible teams, good fun thing to have.
Way better than Cards Against Humanity. Just going on there.
Yep. And it's work and it's work safe friendly too. Remind me to tell you guys about the story about playing Cards Against Humanity at a government agency. That in itself is a whole podcast episode. But with
that's
it was. I can sum it up in 2 words: not good.
Oh, it was hilarious. All right, let's move on to question number 4. Digging in the bowl. Let's see what we got here. Pull this one out. Ooh, this one cuts deep. What is the most challenging part of Agile? Tell me a specific case where Agile helped. I'll read it one more time. What is the most challenging part of Agile? Tell me a specific case where Agile helped.
Boy, there's a lot of ways to think about that question.
Mm-hmm.
The most challenging part of Agile, I think it's finding the right pieces that work together for a team, organization, or a company. Like, what's the right instance of Agile for this team? Like, what's the right framework? Matt and I have, I mean, you too, Omar, I think all three of us have seen it successful multiple times. One of the ones that comes to the top of my head is a project that I did out in California where we were trying to design this. This customer had 13 times in the past tried to create this software to handle flight scheduling. And all 13 times it had failed to get adoption from the community. So they would hire a company, they would build it for a year or two and then release it. And then people hated it and they wouldn't use it. And they would go back to, like, when we got in there on scene and we started out by doing user research, people were using whiteboards and like magnets or Excel spreadsheets, and every place was different in how they did it. So we took a very agile and human-centered design approach to it, where we started by starting in the discovery phase and learning about the context of the problem space by going out and talking to people who were doing flight scheduling currently. How are you currently doing it? Why do you do it this way? What's hard about it? And collecting those pain points and those problems, and then turning those into like an ideation session where we came up with a bunch of different ideas for how we might design software to solve the problems that we heard from people, and then rapidly prototyping something that we can get back in front of them and have them interact with in order to get their feedback. So that was being really intentional about learning as quickly as possible. So not taking an approach where we designed all of the dependencies and features and building it all out and then releasing it and see if we built the right thing. We did rapid prototyping to get it out there. And then we went through iterations of that. So we build, measure, learn as quickly as possible. And we held our idea very open-handed. So we had a concept for our first prototype. And by the third one, like, it looked very different because we were adapting based off of what we were hearing, because we needed to build something that made sense to people for them to use it. Otherwise, it would have failed again. So that approach worked really well because we were able to get to the point where we got really positive feedback on our third iteration of the prototype. Then we could use that to define, okay, now what's the MVP within this? And let's go ahead and creating a backlog that we can work on in order to build the actual functioning thing and get it out there. So, and that project has since gone on to be actually really successful and named like as a program of record for that particular customer. So it worked because we were really intentional about learning as quickly as possible and delivering, like you said, Omar, the right thing to the right people at the right time.
That's awesome. Mine's much shorter of a time frame, but I think it's a good like alternative application of like Agile. So in our engagements, like Open Innovation Labs, we called them residencies, and they're very like short, condensed, immersive experiences to where we work side by side with customer developers in order to produce value, like tangible value. During the first week, it's a very intense week of looking to create shared understanding, knowledge, and build backlogs of what work we're actually going to do based on the use case. And so I want to talk about just that 1 week. And within that week, we come in and we run things like, so if you're familiar with like Lean Inception, it's a very structured style of workshop that you look to produce value. You look to produce like a backlog of what you want to accomplish, a prototype, all of these kinds of things. And so when we're starting to uncover that, we come in with a structure that has been proven to work with many other customers. But at one health insurance like provider that we were working with, that wasn't working. We were trying to run a practice that difficult to learn, event storming. It's a very complex practice. And if you're unable to start getting some of the outcomes of the practice, which is basically like a system flow of events for whatever piece of the application that you're looking to try and map out, right? That's a map of the system, event-based diagram. And if you can't quite get down that path, right? Well, you can't do a lot of the subsequent, narrowing in, creating shared understanding, ubiquitous language, all of these things you will not have. And what we did is we actually knew when to pull the andon cord. So One of the hardest things, to get back to the original question, is to know when what you are doing is not right.
Yep.
And having the courage to stop the world, to actually say, this isn't getting us where we want to be. Let us try something different. And so when we pulled the andon cord, when we stopped that world, we completely abandoned the activity. We abandoned event storming at the customer, and we pivoted quite drastically from an event-based flow, trying to map things out in that form, to using domain storytelling. Yeah. And then we actually did, we call it, we called it UI bingo.
UI bingo,
to where we started doing, like, it was a bit of like a collaborative UI building for like the application that we were trying to do. So based on the domain storytelling that we did, which is uncover the like journey of the customer, the user, we then said, okay, now what would it look like from a UI perspective? And then we basically used a like 1, 2, 4 all mentality from liberating structures, and we eventually collaborated onto what we called the ultimate flow. And that got us to where we wanted to go, because then we could actually map out the journey of the user with a UI that we were going to build. And it was that confidence in knowing when to stop pushing forward with the process that we had thought was good, and choose a different path and be agile inside of our agenda.
Excellent. I would say probably in the federal space, one of the most challenging things is just, I would say, early adoption. And by that, I mean people understanding what we're trying to do and the approach we're doing. So one of the examples, again, in federal space, working with a program manager, we did our initial discovery session, sat down with them, and then we kept coming back. And they're like, why are you coming back to me? I already gave you my requirements. I should see you in like 4 months. And having to explain to not only them, but also other program managers, because they were brand new to what Agile is. They're so used to working waterfall, where, hey, here's what I want, go build it. And we said, hey, no, that we establish feedback loops. We'll do a rapid prototype. We'll show it to you, get feedback, come back and say, okay, here's it now. What do you think? So the fun example is building the car, where, hey, here's the wheels, here's the base, I put doors on, things like that. But the car won't be done for a year. But at the end of the day, you're not getting value. Like, if you take that approach, like, okay, here's a skateboard you get from point A to point B. It's not a car, but you can still get value. You're able to bring something from point A to point B. Okay, well, here's a bicycle. Okay, here's a motorcycle. Here's a motorcycle with a cap. And then eventually you get to the car, but your requirements change throughout that time. It's like, wait, we live in the mountains, so we definitely need 4-wheel drive. Okay, boom, we change the drive chain. Or you say, hey, it's always raining. Well, we need better wipers or blades or Rain-X or whatever. So you learn that by talking more and showing, okay, and doing the quicker, faster iterations, you're able to get that feedback. So it's like trying to establish that at first is hard. And then it just is a challenge, because they're like, this is how we've always done it. Like, I give you, here's my document, my requirements document. I'll see you in a year. Like, no, that's just not how we do it. And getting them used to us always coming back to them, get their feedback. They're like, well, you want my input? I'm like, yes, we want your input. You speak to the user community. We need their input too. Like, oh, this is awesome. Like, usually it will take us like 6 months to a year to get something changed, but by doing smaller, faster iterations, we can get change out quickly. I'm like, yes, you can. So it's just getting that early adoption is usually the challenge. And how to, where the case from the question was, tell me a specific case where Agile helped. So in this situation, creating those faster feedback loops help us respond to issues from people in the field, and we're able to resolve those issues much quicker.
I think it's very key in what you said as well around users and people in the field that are actually like leveraging what it is that you are trying to build. When you start getting layers of proxies, you start losing the fidelity of the feedback and the input, because you're divorcing the interpretation and the context at which things are, because you don't want to end up with a troop carrier with a turret on top with anti-tow missiles, portholes that is also amphibious.
We've seen that video,
awesome video. But have you seen the full movie? I have not. I have it in my HBO queue. No. So I need to watch the whole movie. Apparently Kelsey Grammer's in it. I didn't know that. All right.
So now you got to watch it. Awesome.
All right, perfect. We are getting close to our time box here, so we are not going to do another question, but I would love for both of you to tell our audience where they can find you and how they can reach you.
Matt.
Oh, I guess I'm like the first. I get to go first in all the cases, except for the one I think that was like human-centered design. I think Jerry just kind of jumped in on that one.
Jerry's the HCD guy.
I know who I am.
The HCD, OCD.
Yeah.
AFK and his DVDs getting down with OPP.
There you go.
Open Practice Podcast, OPP. So where can you find me? I am on LinkedIn, just Matt Takane. If you just do like the /IN/ it's just my name, Matt Takane, no spaces or dashes or nothing. You can find me on Twitter. It's just at Matt Takane. So very simple there. You can also find me on the Open Practice Podcast. So if you are interested in hearing more about deep dives for the practices that are on the Open Practice Library, you can find me there. You can find me, shit, where else can you find me?
All over the place, everywhere.
Just
Planet
Google me. I think I have a Google result on swimming.
Wait, so you're on the Open Practice Podcast? I'm on the Open Practice Podcast. That makes two of us. That's one way you can keep up.
There you go.
That's a good one. I would recommend highly that you guys listen to the Open Practice
Do
Podcast.
it.
Oh, no.
Technology.
Okay. How else can you keep up with me? So LinkedIn, Jerry Becker. And for Twitter, it's at Jerry Jokes a lot because I do joke a lot. But between Twitter, LinkedIn, and the podcast, there's a way to reach out to us in some way or form.
All right, perfect. And thank you both so much for jumping on episode 4 of the Agile Table Topics podcast. I look forward to having both of you on again in the future, and maybe I'll cross back over to OPL. I haven't been there in 2 years. Jump over there and we'll talk about a practice. So thank you. And for our audience, all the links and descriptions will be below. Go ahead and do there. Like and subscribe, all the good fun stuff, and we will catch you later. And call to action. If you have a question on Agile, program management, project management, facilitation, drop us a comment and we will answer it at a future show. All right. On behalf of myself, Matt, and Jerry, thank you so much, and we'll see you later.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.